Throughout history, cultures around the world have told tales of terrifying and awe-inspiring creatures, monsters that lurk in the shadows, guard sacred places, or challenge the bravest of heroes. From the fire-breathing dragons of Europe to the shape-shifting yoki of Japan, these mythical beasts embody the fears, beliefs, and imaginations of their people. This series will explore some of the most legendary monsters of mythology, uncovering their origins, powers, and the stories that keep them alive to this day. Welcome to Myth and Lores, a journey into the dark and divine. Without further ado, let's jump into another lore. Ogres have long been shrouded in dark folklore and myth, their origins rooted in the ancient fear of the unknown and the monstrous. These creatures are typically depicted as brutish, large, and cannibalistic beings, often with features that evoke revulsion, such as twisted limbs, gnarled faces, or grotesque deformities. While the details of the ogre lore can vary widely depending on region and culture, they share common themes of malevolence, hunger, and primal connection to the dark, uncivilized forces of the world. Origins of ogre and myths. The earliest known references to ogres appear in European folklore, but similar figures can be found in other cultures. In Norse mythology, for example, the Jotun, the giants, can be seen as distant relatives of the ogre, beings who are often in opposition to the gods and humans. In other parts of the world, such as the Middle East and Asia, stories of large, menacing creatures seem to parallel the ogre archetype. The word ogre itself likely comes from the French, popularized in Charles Perrault's fairy tales in the late 17th century. However, the concept of gigantic human-eating monsters predates these stories, with the ancient Greeks having the tales of Gigantes and Cyclops and the infamous Polyphemus who famously devoured Odysseus' men. In medieval Europe, ogres became prominent figures in myth and fairy tales. They often served as antagonists who would kidnap children or travelers and feast on them. These ogres were often depicted as unreasoning and savage, though some were cunning enough to trap their prey. Ogres are often portrayed as voracious consumers driven by a boundless appetite. They are hungry, not just for food, but for destruction and chaos. They would kidnap women, children, and entire villages, devouring them in their lairs. In some stories, ogres have been known to possess magical abilities that help them capture their victims and conceal their hideouts. Ogres are often described as living in remote, isolated places, deep forests, caves, or mountain ranges far from reach of civilization. This isolation reinforces their role as outcasts, beings who are disconnected from human society and its moral norms. These layers often carry an air of malevolence and decay, mirroring the ogre's twisted natures. Cannibalism is a recurrent theme in ogre folklore. They are not just predators, but creatures that consume their kind or humans without remorse. This grotesque trait ties the ogre to the most primal force of violence, the act of devouring other beings to survive or for pleasure. In specific stories, ogres are organized into tribes or kingdoms led by a king or chieftain. These figures are often more intelligent and strategic, using their strength and cunning to dominate lesser beings. These ogre kings can be seen as embodiments of anarchy and tyranny, ruling over their people with brutal authority. Despite their power, ogres are not invincible. Many European tales, such as Jack and the Beanstalk, involve a hero overcoming an ogre through wit, bravery, or magic. The ogre often represents a challenge or a test of the hero's moral and physical strength, and their defeat symbolizes triumph over darkness and savagery. Ogres in other cultures. The Japanese Oni. In Japan, the Oni are similar to ogres. Oni are frequently depicted as evil spirits that prey on humans, especially children. They are said to live in the mountains or on remote islands where they feast on flesh and cause disasters. While not always depicted as cannibals, Oni share many traits with great ogres of the Western lore, including their monstrous appearance and insatiable hunger. In ancient Persian mythology, ogres appear as divs, malevolent beings that oppose the gods and humanity. These creatures were believed to be dark spirits that resided in desolate and dangerous places, often associated with chaos and corruption. Some stories describe them as monstrous figures who would consume human flesh or spirits, reinforcing the concept of the ogre as a creature that defies the natural order. African and Caribbean folklore. In many African cultures, stories of large, monstrous beings exist similar to ogres. In Caribbean folklore, the Jumbi is a malevolent spirit or creature that shares the ogre's tendency to prey on humans, particularly children. These creatures are often seen as remnants of ancient, pre-colonial beliefs about the wild and the supernatural. Ogres are deeply symbolic, representing the darker, more primal aspects of human nature and the world. They embody the chaos of nature, the fear of the wilderness, and the corruption of innocence. They often symbolize fear of the other. The ogre is an outsider, an inhuman creature whose very existence threatens the moral and social order of the world. In a way, the ogre represents the unknown, the other, that is monstrous and dangerous simply because it is foreign to human norms. Greed and consumption. Ogres are often depicted as being driven by an insatiable physical or metaphorical hunger. They can represent the destructive nature of greed, the desire to consume without limit, and the destruction that results from unchecked desire. Corruption of innocence. Many fairy tales involving ogres revolve around the kidnapping or corruption of children. The ogre in these tales is often a force that disrupts the purity or safetyhood of children, turning innocence into prey. These stories can symbolize the loss of innocence, as children are forced to confront the world's dangers through their encounter with the ogre. In modern media, ogres have been reinterpreted in various ways. They are sometimes depicted as misunderstood creatures, such as in the Shrek franchise, where the ogre is a sympathetic character, a lovable outcast. However, even in these interpretations, the ogre retains some of the primal, darker qualities of the original myth: the fear of being alone, the desire to protect one's home, and an ongoing struggle with an unfriendly world. More traditional representations of ogres can still be found in horror films, fantasy novels, and video games, where they remain embodiments of fear, hunger, and violence. Whether solitary creatures lurking in the dark or monstrous hordes threatening entire kingdoms, ogres continue to haunt our collective imagination as beings representing the untamed and terrifying aspects of existence. Ogres remain a potent symbol of our darkest fears: the fear of being consumed, encountering the monstrous, and confronting the primal aspects of the human psyche. Their mythos have persisted through the ages, shifting in form but never losing its essence, that of beings who exist beyond the boundaries of civilization, driven by hunger, violence, and a twisted sense of dominance. Whether in ancient myths or modern adaptations, the ogre continues to embody the eternal struggle between humanity and the forces of chaos. That concludes this lore. If you like what you heard, please like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next lore. Bye.